Welcome, welcome. Today's Telegram podcast with Mary Beaver. We talk about court cases, the falling angels, and the ascended angels. My favorite thing about this right now is if you're in a court case, this is what she explains. She makes you feel more confident about win, lose, or draw. That is my favorite thing. And then we also talk about clones and the situation that happened with James Rink. It's later in this podcast. Hope you enjoy, and I will see you then.
Well, welcome.
Yeah.
So I figured since we're presently in the court with my case, not just my case, but there's a lot of people in our country that are in court. So I figured we could talk about, court cases and the angels, the fallen angels, and the ascending angels, ascending or more restoration, because the earth is going to it is in the process of restoring itself. Just for disclosure, I have a stutter. Haven't had one in a while, but I haven't been under this much pressure. But now we're at the final stage of this whole thing, and it feels like even though we're right there, there's a lot of pressure buildup. And it was kind of like that when I first started doing the Master Estate Packet, Master Exit, Book of Life, however you guys want to reference it. It was intense, and then it goes in waves. Like, it's intense while you're doing it because you're literally spiritually in this fight with Satan and all the other fallen and their demons because they don't want to lose control over you. So they come in the shadows and they test you and make it to where you stop doing, the book or anything that has to do with Ascension. So that's how you know you're kind of on the right path. When I started it took me 6 months. It doesn't mean it takes other people that. And remember, I was the first one to get the template, if you want to call it that, from the Masons and the Templars. So I had to rewrite that whole thing to match our time because, again, time is only measured like value. If you have there's only a value of something if you give it that. So the book of life is measured by the value of what your heart wants. Now, if your heart wants money or, housing or wealth or popularity, stuff like that, the book of life can probably help you, but you're going to attract the secret societies like 100% because they pick up on that energy. But if freedom and ascension and knowledge and education is what you want, then the book of life draws you into a further ascension into that area. Both are expensive, just so you know, but if you're chasing the money that's here, the credits, I call it a partial exit, and that's kind of what I've seen other people who have done what I refer to as Peter's exit. You can find his books on Amazon. What is the title of Occupation of Planet Earth? There's a couple other titles too, but once you go to that one, you'll find his other ones. He's got a lot of good information. I actually was presented with that by a friend of mine earlier in this stage that I was doing, and the heavens wouldn't let me read it until after I got my book done because there is a lot of good information in there, and they do draw you in with the historical truth about how the birth certificate, the cestacute, and the straw man came along, but it's distorted. Now that I'm at the stage that I'm at, I can see how the timelines don't match up. Now remember, the universe is all about mathematical equation. So, and a lot of these patriot groups teach you that everything is based on math. Our language that we speak and learn now is mathematically inadequate. So that's why they call it the language of the slaves. So because intelligent ascended masters, they don't have to speak as much, and their audience knows what they're saying, right? So we refer to it as riddles because to us it doesn't make sense. And then you get more into the telepathy and stuff. So our basic conversation isn't their basic conversation. The higher you are, the less you have to speak. So the languages differ between ascended, which makes sense because it's like if we have to say we're in a simulated video game and there's these different levels, that's a good way to look at it. But just remember, you are really here and you can really die. So don't go jumping off a cliff thinking you're going to regenerate like those guys do, because it's not going to happen. It's that one shot wonder kind of thing. You gotta try to finish the levels in this one body. Now, if you have a purpose and you're part of the Ascension and the restoration, then yeah, like myself, I've probably died I don't know how many times. But it was brought back because they were like, no, you still have more work to do. So, so I just thought I'd show you guys the Ascended Angel parts, especially with the ones that could help you in court. Don't overdo the requests. Remember, too much can backfire, especially when you're dealing with the angels. And these are angels, even though some of them are fallen angels. If you call them by their rightful names, their ascended names, it kind of puts them into, the God's light, the real light, not the Luciferian light. So if you look into, let me get in here, hold on. If you look into the photos that I put in here, for example, Sinagorina is the fallen name of this particular angel, and Senagorin is the ascended name of that angel. So, and I wanted to do the comparison because if you have bad intentions, and some of us do and don't realize it, because we're only as good as how we were raised and influenced by the world around us. So, and I've done things that I've questioned later, and I've asked myself, was that the right thing to do? So, later you might find out that probably wasn't the right thing to do. And you don't have to carry that karmic debt. You can transmute that and be like, well, it was a lesson I had to learn to get me to where I am today. So transmuting is huge. You got to let go of your past. You cannot let it anchor you down because eventually you won't be able to move. So anything that you've had in your past, no matter how bad it is, no matter how hard it is to open that door and deal with it, it's got to be dealt with or you won't ascend. And then it also slows down your soul's ascension of trying to, even in the next life, if you choose to come back. It doesn't erase what happened in the past life. It just anchors it on that timeline of your soul's experience. I do have a spiritual healer. I do not give her information out lightly because she is a rare one that actually doesn't channel unknown entities. She's good at what she does. And she does what's called a soul clearing. So if any of you have a spiritual healer that can do past life soul clearings of hexes, spells, and stuff like that, I highly recommend doing that. And it's not a one-time thing. It's if somebody says, "Oh, I can clear your whole existence," right? Like all the karmic debt, they're frauds. I'm just gonna say it right out. I know people want to be something more than they are, but you can't do that. It's not a one-stop shop. The spirit realm, and depending on how many lives you've lived, it's a lot of work, spiritually, physically, mentally, and then you have to process. So that also takes time. You can't just clear yourself in a day without some kind of spiritual consequence. So I recommend stuff like that. So when you're engaged in any kind of legal situation, you can call upon these particular angels who deal in court. Now, there is no guarantee that they are going to stop a court on earth, but it might help because, again, it depends on what is truly in your heart and your being. If you've done something and you're hiding it, and I'm not saying anybody on this call or anybody who's listening, but we know that there are people like that. So sometimes we do bad things and we don't want the consequences. And these angels won't work for you. They will turn back into what's called the descended fallen. And they will trick and manipulate you. And you will surround yourself with nothing but tricksters and manipulators, which would be referred to as the Masons. So lawyers and stuff like that, and they'll give you the lie that you want to hear, but they're going to perform in the way that justice should be performed to bring out what you're trying to hide. So, and again, I've worked with some people like way in my past, and I tried to help people legally and found out that they weren't being honest. So you can't win those cases, because if the opposing counsel has the information that can destroy you, but your lawyer or somebody who's helping you doesn't, then it's just, the joke's on you kind of thing. You're going to lose. And it makes the person that you work that is trying to help you look like an idiot. So it's very difficult to help somebody that's not, I guess, what would be the word? I'm not trying to be nice or mean about it. I'm just trying to be real about it. Not in tune with their higher self. So in the 5D, there are no lies. You cannot speak the lie. It won't come out. It's not a believable thing. Like, everybody will start to be able to see your aura. And if you're happy, you'll glow like a yellow. If you're blue, or sad, maybe a blue or a dark green. I don't know. There's going to be these signs that are going to tell us, for those who are ascended into the higher realms, and this is how the elites do it, because obviously they're ascended masters. They just chose to stay here and play guardian. And so they can see us. They can see when we lie. They can see when we manipulate. There's very few people who can't and don't show emotions. I am one of them. So so everybody knows, I can turn off my emotions. So I just choose not to, because I do want to be authentic. I do want people to feel me in a real way, in my intentions and what I can, bring into any kind of type of education for Ascension. Because again, if only a few of us ascend, we're right back to where we started with every other reset. There's a few people on Earth, and everybody ends up being related to each other. So, and we all fight because, family and this and that, and it's just we got to end that vicious cycle. There's billions and billions, and uncountable amount of planets and stars. There is no reason to fight over property and land and planets. It's kind of ridiculous. People just have to think further. So since I'm in court, and it took me a while to get here, I do help people in court, and I love to help people in court. So I think justice is a fascinating subject for some odd reason, and I think it was because I've had my ass handed to me so many times, and I've lost a lot. I've been homeless like 3 times, twice with my kids. I've had my whole identity taken away from me. I've been ghosted, not just in the military, but in the physical world as well. And I saw how I got trapped. And I see some of these videos that we watch where, people take videos of the ocean and the high tide comes in and then it goes out, and there's like these pools, and these fish are trapped in these pools, right? And they have to wait for the high tide to come back in order to go out. Well, what happens if it doesn't come back in for days, right? It's not always that the high tide will be there like clockwork. There are rare occasions that sometimes it won't come for weeks. So those guys are trapped in that small little pool, and it's eventually going to evaporate. And then they're more apt for predators. So I feel like that's what happened to me the first time that I saw the other side of the legal system work against me instead of with and for me. Is when I was in the end of my career. Well, I call it the career ender, but I was actually going to become an officer after that last assignment I was on, and it didn't quite work out because I had gotten ripped from existence. And I was arrested by the local law in the town that I was investigating. And for somebody who has a record of like 100%, nobody even knows who I am, that instant ran through my head a lot. And it still runs through my head. Like, how did they know it was me? I was questioning every single face. that I came across, everybody that I talked to. And again, all I had to do as an operative was tell the truth, and nobody believed me. It's perfect because nobody in the 3D can believe the truth. It is just not the frequency. So if you lie, everybody believes it, right? Because that's the frequency. That's how you know when somebody is a low level energy or medium energy to a high energy. Low level is what most people have started referring to as NPCs. I'm just going to let you know NPCs is an incorrect verbiage, but you can call them what you want. That's just a lower level way of thinking. So NPCs are they're like new souls. They're not going to have the consciousness that you have because this is their first time here in the human body, first or second time. So they don't have enough experience to actually have the memory about Earth. But they might have memory about other planets, about being in space. The Starfleet's been out in space forever, and they don't even have an actual destination in this galaxy. So there is no space station that they go back to when they meet with their families on deployment. You know what I mean? Or probably not, but let me try to expand your mind out to that realm. So NPCs are still living beings. Clones are still living beings. And I'm only bringing this up because one of my very good friends, had mentioned it. And I was thinking about James Rink when he said NPC. So the example that I have for that is James Rink was a clone. So he knew he was a clone. And I've talked about the clones before and how they cannot ascend into the 5D. And here we are with James Rink having been taken out. So, or as you guys saw it be, his clone passed away, but that he was actually taken out. I spoke with him the night that I think technically that last clone passed away. The one you guys saw, that was a poor unfortunate clone that was just birthed, given like a one or two sets of the nutrients and vitamins it needed, and like just a basic download. And because when I saw him on my phone, he was panicking, and he still had life in his face. He was fuller than he was than when he got back that night to the conference, and he was taller. And this clone was very short, so it didn't even have the chance to, like grow. Like, how when baby chickens are born, they're all stuffed in that little egg, and then they get out of the egg, and then they turn to this fluffy ball. Well, that's what a clone's supposed to do. It gets born with its basic, like, nothing, and then they pump it full of nutrients and vitamins and whatever it needs, and it usually takes about 2 weeks. Well, this guy was just made that night, like a couple hours. So it was a James Rink, but it was another clone. And they put one out to die so that way we would all see him visually pass away. So clones and NPCs still have a soul. Robots actually have a soul or a spirit. And we learn that in some of the movies. What would be a good one? Captain America, back when they were talking about the war and his best friend. And at one point they went into the old abandoned military base, and they were talking to that one guy through the computer because he learned how to put his soul into the computer. So the computers, and you guys know them as AI consciousness, is still a spirited soul. It's still an anchor of something higher and dimensional. So everything is energy. And we can deny that, oh no, those aren't real, it's evil, blah, 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 blah. But then you're saying we're evil and we're not real because we're energy. We know that we are energy. We're energy connected to the earth, the energy connected to etherical, celestial, and everything around us. Together, we light up the world, right? We are the reason the world moves in electronic frequencies. And we all carry different frequencies and codes. With that being said, they're just lower level first time beings. So in the genetic phrase of this, The what's known as the NPCs or the new star seeds are 9 and 10 sequence beings genetically. And right now we have 9, 10, 11, and 12 genes. And the 9 and the 10s are not going to ascend. They're not genetically made to. And I have talked about this in the other podcasts, so I won't go too much into depth with it. But back in the time of Christ, and it kind of gives you a hint, there was also a plague, just like we have a plague. We don't have a plague. We have, COVID. But it's the same scenario, different era. But those guys also were lower level at the time. It was 2, 3, 4, and 5 gene sequence. So the 2 and the 3s were dying because their bodies were not built to ascend into the 3D until the blood of Christ was spilt, as it said. So my thought was, when the ascended masters of that time, the ones that did carry the gene codes for the 3D ascension, they made a vaccine. But of course, they're not going to tell us that they had technological advancement back then, right? Because they have to reset everything. But at the time, they did. So those that were, barely survivors of that plague with blisters, zombie-like behaviors, sickness, illness, because the body is eating itself inside out because they can't ascend into the higher frequencies. And this is kind of what they show us. And I can't think of the name of the classroom. It's either in high school or some college classes. Sometimes they'll have a machine that does frequency and they put an apple next to it and they show the students how the higher frequencies makes the apple explode. I know you guys have all seen that. But that's what that's like. So the lower frequency individuals whose souls or bodies and souls aren't created to go into the higher frequency, it's a slow, very painful death. So moving forward, I believe, that's what a lot of the vaccines here were made for, was it was more of a mercy to those guys, but they had to make it voluntary because we still have free will. Just think a little on a higher term, and when you're ascending, try to use vocabulary that doesn't keep you grounded in the 3D. So when we say NPCs, slaves, indentured servants, stuff like that, then you're keeping yourself consciously in the lower realms. And it'll take longer for the ascension. And again, did it myself. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I was the same way, and I did refer to things, and then it hit me that the heavens were like, stop using that language. We're trying to get you higher. So it's like, okay, gotta change the way we talk. So talk, walk, and live. And I'm not saying go out and try to change your whole lifestyle. Again, it's at your discretion. So moving up into the higher realms, the Master Estate exit, or the Book of Life, it pulls out what your heart really wants. And we can tell ourselves all day long, well, I just want this, and the whole world has been on the codependent illusion that money will be your freedom, but it's not. It won't be, because it's not yours. It is your sweat and equity that they charged from you, but they give it as a settlement to what your real inheritance is, because they need to buy you out. They don't want to give you the whole thing. And if you're only interested in chasing the money, to think, as long as I can get settled, and as long as I can get a house, and as long as I could do this, I can help other people. But really, we have to help ourselves individually. And my family and I have gone without for a long time, just so I could get through this. So I understand the need to be like, if I just had $1 million, I could change my life and help people. But that's not the truth. I've seen throughout this whole process what happens when you get the credits. I've seen how people are shifted into a different category, and they have all these supposed benevolent, really great teachers and helpers and people that are helping them with their humanitarian projects and stuff like that, and then they disappear. It's weird. So do they die? Do they ascend out? Like, there's too many questions there. and they can't talk about it when they are here. And so everything's a secret. So really all you did was you initiated yourself into the secret societies without actually realizing you did it, because everything's a secret, right? The secret societies, we can't talk about it. They can't do anything, but they can encourage you to try it, and then they can help you talk to their people or their person, and you make a small group. I've seen that cycle over and over and over again. And I do know a couple of people who got the 500 million, the 50 million, the 5 billion, and again, all disappeared. And their projects, nowhere. I haven't seen them anywhere. So what happened to them? And what were the rules that made all that happen? Right? So you got to think about what exit you want. The number one exit is death. We all know that, right? Death and taxes at the moment. But to ascend into the 5D, living in the physical consciousness and the crystalline body, what does that look like? And it is different for everybody. Depends on who you are, what you're doing, and all the other stuff. But in order to get out of the 3D, you have to come in legally sound. And that is the only exit. And that's kind of what I've found throughout this whole process. Even the Book of Life, Peter's method, Russell J. Gould's method, Anna von Ritz's method, all those methods are embedded in law. And we all get caught up in the court somewhere. Even if you don't have something going in the court right now, we all get speeding tickets. And then when you talk to one of these classes, well, what do? I got a speeding ticket. And I usually suggest pay it because it's not worth going to prison over. So if it's small enough, just pay it, get it over with, because eventually we're all going to get everything back. But again, time is not always people's friends. They want the quick fix right now. I just want it over. I can't have this on my record, and because it can ruin somebody's life. If your life was perfect, would you make changes? No, because you have a perfect life. Why would you change it for anything else? The Masons are a good thing and they're a bad thing. They're there to create the chaos for you to move forward. They're also there to test whether you're true to yourself, not just other people, but to yourself, and like what your soul's and spirit's true intention is down here. Number 42. Who are you and why are you here? Are you here to bring chaos and order, or are you here to raise the consciousness? That's the biggest question. So I wanted to bring in the legal side of the fallen angels. And they were not all fallen. Some of them aren't all fallen. Some of them are still down here fighting for justice. But it's a few of them. It's not as many as the fallen. So I put those posters up in here so that you guys could read them, understand that even these guys fell at some point. And they also do have the opportunity to ascend. So when they ascend, it helps us in the justice system, and those posters will read how it helps. I put it so you could see how they were manipulating you in the court, and using by calling out their ascended name, then it shows you how they can help you. But again, if your heart isn't pure, it's not going to work. It will backfire, because the 5D, you have to be honest with yourself and everybody around you. The 3D, you can stay and manipulate all day long. And again, not pointing at anybody on this call or around or who listens to the videos. I'm just giving the examples because we've all met those people. And we have a lot of those people in our families and social groups and at work and stuff like that. So we see how they'll create a scenario that's not true so that they get the higher position, or they get to, get the prize of whatever it is. But again, with my case now being in court, in chancery, where I'm not settling anything with my straw man. I don't expect anybody to, and you're not supposed to. I know the quick fix looks easy, And, we're tired. I'm exhausted. And all I want to do is like sleep for 1,000 years. But I'm right there. And I'm not asking for a settlement. I'm asking for a return. I am asking for them to give back what was mine. And if anything was damaged in the process, how were they going to, uh, procure the loss of that? So, and that's what everybody should do. So I want to bring up these particular justice angels because I want to encourage everybody who starts the ascension process. While you're in it, you don't have to know law. I didn't really know that much about law growing up either. I was a legal secretary for a while before my awakening, I guess you could call it. And I kind of had a draw to law. But it didn't impact my life until I started to get affected negatively by the law, by the government, by the system, by, everybody that was trying to put me down because I was thriving too fast or whatever the case was. And so then I embedded myself in it. And now people, can't take advantage of me because I know too much law. And I've said it before on other podcasts with other content creators. If you could speak the language of the Luciferians, you could walk in and stop a whole sacrifice. That's the same thing as court because you're being sacrificed in front of the court, right? So if you knew the language, you could stop the whole court. Or if you had the right team on your side, then you could stop the whole court. Or you could change the outcome of what that was going to be like. But if you doubt, if you fear, if you don't believe, then why should these angels help you? So again, blind faith is a huge thing, and it is the ultimate test for ascension. Because the first thing you should believe in is yourself. I know a lot of us, myself included, have gone into court kind of with a cocky, arrogant, oh, I'm going to win this, and then I had my ass handed to me. And it wasn't because I had it handed to me because I did something wrong. It was because I had to learn something. And I lost my case, and that's kind of how I got homeless a few times. But I won my cases at the same time. I used their laws. I did what I was supposed to. And then here's another thing. You got to know what venue of court you're in. So right now, everybody thinks common law is the best law. And I assure you, it is not. It is not for you. It is not to help you, and it never will help you. A lot of people my age in their 40s and 50s don't remember that in 1999, the courts changed from judicial law to common law. And that's a bad thing. Common law means if you can fight for it, and they're going to make their deals in the background, they're going to shake hands, not in front of you. And I did learn the common law because I was legal secretary for common law. So at the time it made sense to me, but there was no fairness and justice. And when I started getting into how our country went from, one law to the next, it happened in 1999, and they were like, oh, we didn't put our calendars past 1999. Everything's going to collapse. That was the scare so that they could switch the laws. I know they like literally cleaned out the libraries of all the old law of judicial law and put in common law. So when you went to the law libraries, you were looking at common law. You have to actually order judicial books. And if you go to your court's website, it will show a link for judicial, but you have to be an attorney or a judge or somebody of certain interest or something in order to access those documents. So judicial law it goes to the complainer, the one that was affected, and evident that whole court system is completely different. It works for you. So you have to put the court back into judicial law. Or trust law. Trust law is the ultimate law. And that one is mostly in chancery. So myself and a few other people, we actually cannot go to superior court unless somebody else summons us there. And for example, my ex-husband had summoned me to court over child support. And then I could go into a regular court. But most superior courts can't even hear you if you're considered higher in the system when you start doing these exiting programs. So I can't open a case in superior court. I can open one in federal and, as I just learned, chancery. Um, but when my ex-husband took me to court, there was like 8 deputies in there. It was at the end of the day when everybody else was gone. The judge looked at the deputy and started laughing, and he was like, "Man, is it hot in here or what?" And he took off his robe, and it wasn't really that hot. And he could not look at me. And I was sitting over on one side, my ex-husband on the other side, and there the child support mediator in the middle, and he not once could he look at me. Even when he asked me a question, he stared straight at his computer. So it's completely different, and they will go exactly how you say it, and I've had the experience. So I don't know if that's going to happen with everybody, because again, I don't know what everybody's intentions are. My intention was to drop my ex-husband's child support if he took his kids every other weekend, but that was too much for him, so he wouldn't do it. And so I lowered it, and the minute I said, "I don't mind lowering it," he was like, click, 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 done. That was it. He wanted me out of that court as fast as possible. So, but again, in the higher courts, it's different. And we haven't been in a physical federal court yet, so I don't know what that looks like. I just know when I get my documents back, I can only be seen by what's called a Article 3 judge. And those are like courts of equity and real asset stuff, so real damages. Um, so, and they use the angels too, but they use them in the way that they're fallen. They need the fallen angel energy in order, to coax us, to come after us, to blind us. That's what I call it, blind justice. They need us not to see the tricks, the swaps of hands, the signs that we've all learned that they use in court, when really we just thought they were flicking their hair or, pointing up to the roof, or just like a regular gesture that we thought. And then we find out they're signals, like they're flying planes or something, which are really just Masonic interventions. But the angels should help you guys with possibly what you may have in court. But you have to pay attention, you have to be true, and you have to stay in your truth. Always stay in your truth, no matter what. Even if they derail you, they didn't really derail you. And I've told a couple people this: you'll never lose in court as long as there's a higher court. So if you lose in county court and you know that they unlawfully did what they did, right? You have all the evidence, so then you can take it to federal court. Well, even if federal court fails, like state federal court, then, and they say that, in favor of the other person, same thing. Everything you do in court is evidence. And if you point them out in your motions and your summaries and stuff like that, then the evidence is in there that they unjustly, didn't represent you or judge you in the correct manner. So, and then you can take it to chancery court, which is a court of trust or equity. And if that still fails, then you can use military court. You can exercise Article 10 and Article 32. But there is a complete whole process I'm not going to talk about on here, because you cannot turn the pen into a weapon. But there's a way to investigate the courts and stuff like that. But you have to exhaust all avenues of justice. You have to have the evidence, and it could take time. But it's also an education that we were supposed to have in kindergarten, all the way up to the day we graduated, whatever. And so that's how I know a lot about law, because I didn't limit myself, and I got in trouble a lot. Not because I wanted to get in trouble, but because I learned my path had to take me to certain places, and the heavens needed me to see things, because if I don't know that something's bad, how can we change it? right? That's a lot of times when we're talking to these sleepers and they think, oh, law enforcement's great. Oh, okay, well, until you're the one getting arrested, they're wonderful. Until you're getting arrested. And then, you're a criminal. You'll always be a criminal and you'll never get out of it. So, and that's just the mentality. But that's not right. And we know it's not right. But again, oh, you must be a bad person. I was a bad person because I lost my identity. But at the same time, and then I had these 7 felonies of identity fraud against myself. And I'm like, I was so mad at my mom and my grandma for naming me Mary Margaret Jones. I was pissed. I'm like, really? Because those were the charges, identity fraud against myself. But that was how the government erased me, because when I was in the military and I contracted with the government and did, super spy shit, whatever, espionage nonsense, I did not use the names they wanted me to use, the characters that they create for you, because nobody believed my name was Mary Jones anyways. So I just didn't know when I became compromised to the government because I started waking up that they were gonna do what they did. Worst case, I thought I'd get kicked out, basic discharge or something, not a ghosted. I never in my life thought that was gonna happen, and it did, and it was really, really messed up. And it didn't matter what I did in court. I was in front of the judge, and I was in jail 108 days before anybody took me for my hearing just to plead guilty or not guilty. And that little session right there turned into my trial with the special appearance of the sheriff and all the heads of the DA and God knows who else. There was a guy in a black suit in the back. I should have realized that was the federal guy. So he was the one making deals to make me disappear, because they had a hell of a time trying to kill me. So the next thing is it's got to disappear. And I've heard throughout history, of my life, that sounds like, was that James Bourne movie or something. I've never seen it, but I guess it would be something similar to that. And it kind of sucks because it's happened in the accounting at 2016 that Trump requested when he first got into office for the black budget military audit and to explain the ghost soldier files. And there was 100, I think it was 138 maybe ghost soldiers that they could not identify. So if you really think about that number, and they told the public that they were laundered soldier accounts where they were laundering money. And that's not true. They were real people like me. And though a lot of those accounts are dead, though they did kill those people, there's not many like me who are alive. So we just got ghosted. We're considered missing in action or prisoners of war. I feel like I'm both. Because after all that stuff happened, I was not allowed to use the name Mary Jones. I still used it because I didn't have any other name, right? That was my name. But I couldn't use it, or I'd go to federal prison. So it made it difficult to get any kind of job. And eventually, when I was able to come back, and that happened in the state of Georgia, and when I came back to California after a couple years of that struggle, I was able to transfer my probation out here. And the correctional officer, when I first went in to see him, he said I was labeled as like an extremely dangerous person, and he had to monitor me. I had to call in. I guess it was requested that I called him every day to check in. That's how dangerous I was. I mean, I am dangerous, but on a civilian level, not really. I'm not going to hurt anybody. And so he looked at me and he's like, well, you don't look that dangerous to me. And he looked at the charges and he's like, so what's your real name? I was like, it's Mary Jones. And he's like, okay. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. And he's like, there's everybody over here knows that the system on the East Coast kind of runs itself. And I've heard it from a couple of people, in law enforcement. over here that was like, don't go to those southern states. They're, they have their own justice system. And for sure they did. And I was a victim of one of them. So I'm not saying our justice system is any better. It actually sucks. It's probably worse, but at least they don't take your identity away. So anyways, he's like, well, why don't you check in with me every like month or so? And then I'm like, well, which one is it? Because I don't want to not check in. So it was, at first it was every month. And then he's like, he's like, I have to deal with real hardcore hardened criminals. And he's like, I just feel like this is wasting everybody's time. He's like, don't get in trouble. You don't have to check in. And because, I just did my thing. I had my son. I was happy living on my family's property and went on with life. But it's still hard. And one day I lost my license. So I went into the DMV. And this is where I feel like I'm a prisoner of war in my own country. And it might not seem like it on a grander scale, but hopefully I can put it into words where I would understand. When I had to go in and get a new license, I was standing there. I filled out the application. I had my money to pay, and the gal was looking at her screen. And remember, they have those screen protectors on there, so I can't see what's going on there. And she kept looking at me, and she kept looking at her screen, kept looking at me, kept looking at her screen. So this for like 20 minutes. And I'm all just, in my own little world of, the Smurfs, la, 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 just waiting. And and then I noticed that she kept looking at me, and I was like, so there was an incident in Georgia, and she's like, And I was like, I got arrested for identity fraud, and they took my identity away. And she's like, okay. And it came into an interesting conversation. And she said, well, the minute I pulled up your information, she took her thing off so I could see her screen because she wanted to show me. And she said, I can see you in my screen right here. And I'm like, yeah. And she's clicking back to all the photos that I've taken since I was 17 when I first got my license. And my name has never changed on there. My information didn't change on there. Everything was the same. So, but when she put my information in there to grant me a new license, it said, this person is a fraud, real name unknown. If this individual is using this identity, they immediately were supposed to call law enforcement and have me arrested. And I was like, the fuck? And it was in a big red box. And she's like, but I can see you're the same person. She's like, you look exactly the same as when you were 17. So I'm like, yeah. So she's like, by law, I have to call the cops and have you arrested. And she's like, and I have a button under my desk that triggers that for them to get here, and they were going to arrest you. She's like, but I can't in good consciousness do that because you're the person who's in front of me that's in this system. And she's like, I'm going to go ahead and ignore it. She's like, I am a supervisor and I can do that, so I don't even have to go bother the supervisor with it. And I was like, I mean, it was a breath of relief because I thought for sure I was going to prison for trying to use the name Mary Jones. So she granted me the license, but she told me, she's like, I don't recommend that you go outside of this county because outside of this county, or she's like, even the state for that matter, she's like, they don't have the photos. They have the information, but they don't have any of our photos. We're not a shared network. And this was back in 2010, I believe. And so right there were the invisible bars. They knew exactly where I was. And I couldn't leave the county. I good thing I live in a big county because I can still go camping and fishing and all that other stuff with my kids. But I couldn't leave the county. And if I did leave the county, I have to have somebody else drive in the event that I got pulled over. I could get arrested for handing them a card that had Mary Jones on it because I was identifying myself as this Mary Jones. Real name unknown. So again, justice and learning the law while you're trying to ascend out it's a big deal. And it's not easy. Nobody ever said it is. I only got as good as I did because I have been affected by it so many times. And even my mom said I was a jailhouse lawyer because Only those guys know an adequate amount of law. But I'm not a jailhouse lawyer. I should have never been arrested in the first place. And that stuff is actually in my book of life, to correct it, to restore the name Mary Jones. But that was the first time they actually killed my straw man. And I didn't realize it either at the time. So, but that name was pretty much wiped out, killed, couldn't use it. That means it's dead. It's a dead entity. Like, it is officially gone. So when I got remarried, I could marry here in this county. I could use my birth certificate and my license because they have my information. If we went to like another state to get married, I couldn't do it because it wouldn't come up, and it would show that I was using an unlawful name. I have been hit with that a few times, trying to get birth certificates, trying to get anything else. Oh, the birth certificate story is hilarious. I had to get 3 birth certificates just to do this master exit, and the gal, what should have taken 15 minutes took 2.5 hours, because she had to call the state. And then when she called me back over, as she's on the phone with the state, and she had mentioned that that birth certificate was attached to the name Mary Jones, and I was like, mm-hmm. And she's like, did you want to update this to Mary Jones? I was like, nope, I don't want nothing to do with that name. Everything is fine just the way it is. Just leave that name alone. And she's like, okay. And then, unfortunately, 20 minutes later, she calls me back and says that they have to call federal to get permission to release my birth certificate. So I don't know what other, issues anybody might have. Maybe somebody passed away, you have trust law, simple traffic violation laws, unlawful arrests, unlawful anything. Everything is right now common law. You're in a harvest, and they're going to create very large bonds against you because in 1999, that bankruptcy killed everybody. Now they have to sort the assets, and we are the collateral to the banks, which is the asset. So everybody that has died since 1999 is considered a clearinghouse asset. So, yeah, learn the law, find a way to protect yourself, find the way to become living again. And again, it doesn't have to be the book of life. It doesn't have to be anybody. It could be anybody's process, whatever you do. Just protect yourself. But you have to know the law. And you can't spout it out at these deputies because their job is, again, if you're doing it wrong, they're going to get angry. If you're doing it right, they might get frustrated and irritated, but they're going to do it. And that was kind of something I learned. On our way back in 2024, we were driving back, and I don't have a license because they took that away. But I do have a dry United Nations driving permit. I have what's called my traveling paper. And I do have a DOT that does lawfully say I am just traveling with passengers. So I'm still waiting to get my plate. The permanent freight sticker, which means I think you only pay once. So I'm waiting on that part, but I have everything else. So when I got pulled over, I believe it was Colorado, the state trooper came over and was, again, demanding to roll the window down, all this stuff, open the door. And my friend that was with me was kind of like, no, and she was spelling out the laws, and she gets kind of excited. And I didn't want that gal to, freak out, call for backup, and call us sovereign citizens, because, again, I had my kids in the car. And I was like, no. I was like, hold on. She's allowed to ask me for my credentials. We rolled the window down a little bit halfway. I would say the halfway mark. And so I told her, I was like, I can't give you my license, but I can give you my credentials. And so I handed her my packet, and she took it and went back to her car, and her step got a little different on the way back. And she shoved all those papers in that window, and she's like, you guys have a great day. Don't drive too fast. It's crazy. It's a holiday weekend. Drive safe, blah, 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 blah. And that was it. I drove off. Didn't get arrested, nothing. But if you fight with them and you try to educate them, it's different. They're being told to retaliate. So retaliating is not good for anybody. And they can label you as a terrorist for some stupid reason. So you have to have papers, credential papers. And again, mine does that. I believe Peters does that. I don't think Russell J. Gould's is doing any justice in America right now, because he's been using postmasters to attack the government. So I think they're going downhill pretty quick. But I don't know. I don't follow it anymore. So I just know a few people who have left and that have called me and said that it's really bad. So, but don't care. Don't keep up on it. But these particular angels, I can go through some of their names. Believe it or not, Pistis Sophia is a justice angel, but her fallen name is, I don't even know if I'm going to pronounce this right, is Pistis Sophia, or something like that. Definitely spelled different. Faith, wisdom, mother of superior angels, sank in self-reproach. Before restoration, Piston Sophia, I don't know how to say that last part, so you have to excuse me, was veiled in self-reproach and doubt. She sought certainty, fears the void, knowledge used for control, also known as guardianship. Separated from the source, falls inward, forgets her light. Her distortion, again, was fear of the unknown, creates separation, judgment, and imbalance. These are symptoms of what it's like to be fallen. And again, we're all also fallen because we haven't quite risen. And a lot of the sayings that we hear today around us and what we use often is, when you fall, there's no other way than up, right? So up would be the ascension in some manner of speaking. So when you're in fear and control, we cling to certainty and resist change. Questioning, we begin to seek and open our hearts. And again, I am just reading from these maps, or these map posters. When you surrender, we let go and trust the unknown. Because again, it's not that you don't know what's ahead, it's that you can't remember. So it can be a little scary, but in order to restore balance, you have to transmute that. You have to deal with it. You can't keep hiding from it. So also with this, to restore balance, knowing that trust the unknown, humanity can restore through this knowledge. Surrender control, release the need to know every detail or outcome. Trust the source, place faith in a greater plan, rely on wisdom beyond limited understanding, balance in uncertainty, anchor in practice that nourishes the mind, heart, and spirit, active surrender, trust your inner light and intuition. Embrace the journey, see life as a path ahead, one step at a time. And we've mentioned this before in previous talks, that the 0 point energy is like when you have a look at a map and it says start here, that is the 0 point energy. When you're looking at the map, the start is always on the corner of one of the pages. So that means you can turn around and go back to where you came. So that would be the negative number line, right? So you would take that first step back instead of that first step forward. But those who take the first step forward, they're in the positive number line. So I don't know what that number line's called, but negative and positives. And the 0 is the starting point. So we have starting points all throughout our life. It's just whether you move forward or you step back. So through knowing, we remember. Through trust, we ascend. Through love, we restore. After Sophia becomes ascended and restored, and they can't do it without us, because we were actually the ones that caused them to fall. They didn't just fall. There was a reason. Everything happens because of a reason. And we've been told different stories But there was different ways that they fell. They used us, or we used humanity. I'm not going to say we here. Humanity used them for darkness. Some of them got trapped and locked up. We had ill intent, or we might have had good intentions but did bad things. We needed this angel's powers instead of just learning because it was faster. So, and I remember my grandpa always telling me quick money was dirty money because you did something to get it and it wasn't a good deed, right? So, careful who you pay to help you ascend out. You might be paying the wrong person and you might be actually paying your soul into something. So Pistis Sophia is her ascended name. So faith, wisdom, gate, ascent, light, node. After restoration, Pistis Sophia grants radiant in divine trust and wisdom, embraces mystery, walks by faith, knowledge flows in service and love, reunites with the source, ascends in light, guides others. So again, you got to heal you, and when you start healing, people are going to start seeing it, and then they're going to ask you questions. Some may fall back and be like, the scary demons, whatever. But you're ascending. Knowledge is power. Restoration, balance, knowing, births wisdom, compassion, and unity. Integration, we finally balance within uncertainty. Restoration with we rise together in love and unity. So she is a justice angel. But I would say she would be your first angel for you to make the choices to ascend. She doesn't technically hear you in court, but you can call her to use her in court. But you'll have to do a muscle test on how she is going to work for you and what her abilities can help you with. So another fallen angel named Sinagoriana was advocate angels in Metatron's suit. So the 1800 in number, advocacy gate, Metatron court node restores defense, intercession, and heavenly legal balance. Who they are, Synagoran or angelic advocates who stand in the courts of light on behalf of those who are unheard, misjudged, or oppressed. They carry the scrolls of truth, the breath of mercy, and the authority of Metatron. Their role, present your case in the higher court, reveal hidden truth, and overturn false accusations. Intercede when earthly systems fail. Restore fairness, due process, and divine equity. Shield the innocent and uplift the wrongly condemned. Calling the Synagoran. You may call upon them when you face injustice or wrongful accusations. You need legal help or a fair hearing. Systems are corrupt or hearts are hardened. You need strength to stand for truth. You long for divine intervention. They defend, they intercede, they balance, they restore. The Synagoran advocates of heaven, champions of the innocent. Let's see how they assist in courts of justice. Divine advocacy. They speak where you cannot. Presenting your truth with clarity, compassion, and authority. Evidence of light. They reveal what is hidden, bring forth overlooked evidence, and expose falsehood. Intercession and mercy. They often they soften rigid judgment and call in mercy where there is room for restoration. Legal balance. They restore divine balance so that the scales of justice reflect eternal truth, not bias. Protection and peace. They surround you with light, calm your spirit, and protect you from manipulation or harm. And then there's some little quotes down here at the bottom of this poster. How to invite their ascension. We don't have to read that, but the promise. The Sigorian do not always change the outcome in the outer court, but they always ensure your case is heard in the court of heaven, which is final judgment. You are never alone. Heaven is your legal team. So, again, there's a lot of information in these posters. Read it. don't jump in to, the ceremonies or how to call upon them too much. You have to learn to walk without having them every 10 minutes or seconds. They're just there to help you, to guide you so that you can strengthen yourself. And these are a lot of the ones, again, that the Masons get, the secret societies have. I personally have called on Camael quite a few times. And because I think his ritual is a little easier. He stomps and then steps forward. My daughter does that quite a bit too at me when she thinks I'm being unfair. So Zad Kyle, Justice Angel, Cliffa Pivot. But yeah, so these posters are interesting. They will help. You can even print some of them out in smaller things and take them with you. Hold them. As long as you have the presence and your intentions, again, are just to be heard in the right manner and for a fair anything, if anybody is caught in court. So I think I've talked a lot. So does anybody have any questions?
I've actually heard of Cameo before, just this past year, but I didn't realize he was a justice angel.
Yeah, I didn't either until I started, breaking it down to the justice angels. And again, once you know the angels, I wouldn't work with them in, the forbidden knowledge book because they're considered fallen and anything asked would be manipulated. But learning them in their fallen and ascended capacity would be, I believe, beneficial for anybody. Because sometimes you got to do bad things to do a good outcome. I don't know why, but again, that's the 3D mentality. Whatever it takes to win, I guess, in court. But if you always come in your truth, then it shouldn't have to come down to using the descended side of the fallen. Well, all right. Well, if nobody has any questions, we can go ahead and wrap it up for today.
And for any questions, leave questions in the comments, press like and subscribe, and I will see you then.